Thank you, Prajwal. Namaskar. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Sruti smriti purananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavat padam shankaram lokashankaram. So we are discussing the four Mahavakyas, which in a way constitute the essence of Vedic or Vedantic spiritual and philosophical traditions, culture, ideas, all you can find in these four Mahavakyas, called great statements. And the first one, the statement of instruction, is called Upadesha Vakya, is Tattwamasi, that we already discussed. And after finishing that first Upadesha Vakya, we will go to Aham Brahmasmi, the Anubhuti Vakya, and then we will discuss the other two Mahavakyas, Prajnanam Brahma, Ayamatma Brahma, Siddhanta Mahavakya, Lakshana Vakya, Manana Vakya, Nididhyasana Vakya, which are all used for for contemplation, for internalization, for meditation. I mean, when you evolve, when you start your spiritual journey from instruction, and when you move towards experience, during that interval, you have to, one should practice a lot of self-restraint, disciplines, nishkama karma, what we call, unselfish activity, lot of spiritual values one should practice. At that time, these two Mahavakyas are very important. Now, this first Mahavakya, Tattwamasi, it has got a great significance. It's not just a statement from an ancient book. In a way, it is the foundation of spiritual morality and spiritual ethics. What it says is the creation, not just human beings, constitute one spiritual family. So we cannot do harm to our next door neighbor, not because God will be angry with you, but because by hurting your neighbor, you are hurting yourself. This is an important thing, because there is no otherness in the highest spiritual culture, in the highest spiritual idea. So there is a lot of ethical and moral ideas behind, implications behind this Mahavakya. Now, a few more important details, then we will come to the next Mahavakya. Now, in spiritual life, there are two ways in which this highest spiritual ideal can be utilized in our everyday life, not just for philosophical discussions, but for everyday life, even in this modern 21st century IT or information or artificial intelligence age. If you can understand and keep in mind that all that we see around us, all the empirical experiences, all the everyday life experiences are real, but not absolutely real, in the sense that they are not everlasting. Everything is momentary. In fact, the concept of momentariness in Buddhism is actually a Buddhistic interpretation of Jagat Mithyatvam. The idea that the world is only a relative entity. I already mentioned this earlier. There are 5 definitions on this Jagat Mithyatvam, the idea that this world is only a relativity. If you want me to repeat, I can repeat maybe during interaction. There are 5 definitions spread over 5 teachers mentioned in some important Vedantic textbooks. So if we can let's say, remember in our life, well, you have a health problem, but that health problem will be resolved in future, sometime in future. Then if we can keep this in mind, we can face this problem of ill health. We can face, let's say, a medical report without being shocked by it. Or when we get angry or irritated with somebody for some reason, if we can keep in mind, oh, this is the nature of the world cannot be perfect. It's only a relative entity. We can very easily confront the problems you're facing. The highest philosopher can say, well, all these things are, well, only relative. There is something higher, transcendental, eternal, and immortal. This philosophical ideal can help us in our everyday life. Of course, if you are a devotee of God, in the Vaishnava tradition, the Ramanuja tradition, there is a grand ideal of what you call prapatti or sharanagati. Where Ramanuja himself wrote a well-known book, one of the minor books, Sharanagati Gadyam is called. So now, if a person can be a sincere devotee of God, and there have been great devotees in all religious traditions, then you can say, well, it's a will of God. It's the grace of God. Trouble and difficulties also is a will of God. So that also will help a person to confront everyday life. So the highest philosophy, highest spiritual ideal, either in the form of Advaita or in the form of Sharanagati in the Ramanuja Vaishnava tradition, both are equally effective. They do have a very practical implication in our everyday life. Ramanuja's, in the Vaishnava definition of Sharanagati is, Anuvulyasya sankalpaha pradi ulyasya varjanam rakshasridi vishwasaha goptrukta varanam tatha atmaniksheva karpanne shadvidha Sharanagati. So a constant remembrance, keeping a positive ideal with regard to spirituality and God, and totally disregarding of negative ideas, and then a strong faith that God is only protector, and then God will protect you, and also total surrender. So in fact, this is the highest reach of devotional philosophy, whether in Christian mysticism, in Jewish mysticism, in Buddhist tradition also. In Buddhist tradition also, in some of the meditative practices that Buddha have referred to in some of his suttas, called sutta. So chanting the same, this same mantras. This is part of Buddhist tradition. Buddhism doesn't believe in a creator God. It doesn't affirm the existence of the ontological existence of a God, but still it believes in some higher spiritual values, spiritual concept, nirvana, and so on. So whether the highest Advaita or the highest devotional philosophy, both have a very practical implication in everyday life. Now, having seen that, I will come to the next Mahavakya. So please remember, Aham Brahmasmi is the Mahavakya in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and then the Prajnanam Brahma is in Aitareya Upanishad, Tattwamasi is in Chandogya Upanishad, Ayamatma Brahma is in Mandukya Upanishad. And one important point we should remember, and this is an important point when we try to understand the meaning of the Mahavakyas. To begin, we will complete Tattwamasi Mahavakya, because Tattwamasi Mahavakya is being analyzed in detail by Shankaracharya in his Vivekachudamani, and of course in other Bhasha literature, and also by Vidyaranya in Panchadeshi, and many other books, Madhusudana, all of them have emphasized this Tattwamasi Mahavakya. So we will just, in a way, we'll repeat what we said earlier. That is, the first important thing to remember is that when we try to analyze this Mahavakya, Tattwamasi, in the Chandogya Upanishad, we should remember there are these Tat, Tum, Asi, three words. Tat when we read an English translation, it perhaps doesn't make much sense. That means that thou art. This is what it means. So very often, I mentioned this earlier, very often this has been grossly misunderstood and misinterpreted to mean that this Mahavakya tells you that you are God. Not at all. That's precisely not what this Mahavakya is implying. So these traditional scholars have established a very well-established way of a kind of a very elaborate hermeneutics in interpreting the meaning of this Mahavakya. So I mentioned this earlier. So in the light of this Mahavakya, Tat, actually here the literal meaning of Tat is Ishvara, God, and the literal meaning of Tvam is Jiva, the individual soul. And what it literally means is they are the same. It means you are Ishvara, you are God. This is a literal meaning. Literal meaning is not, it is totally rejected. So this Vedantic hermeneutics has evolved two ways of looking at the whole thing. One is Vachyartham, means literal meaning, which we are not going to discuss now. This implied meaning is called understanding the implication. What is the true implication of the statement? So while explaining this, there are three methods normally mentioned in Vedantic books. One is, for example, Jagad Lakshana, Ajagad Lakshana, Jagad Ajagad Lakshana. These are Sanskrit terms, but when we explain English, it becomes very simple. Suppose something is stated there. Let us say the classical statement is Gangayam Ghoshaka. There is a hut or a small building on river Ganga. This is the literal meaning of this statement. Gangayam, it is Saptami Ekavachana, I mean Ganga. Or in the river Ganga or on the river Ganga. That's literal. But the real implication is there is a hut or a house on the banks of the river Ganga, not in the middle of river Ganga. There was no houseboat in those days. So there is a hut or a building on the banks of river Ganga. Now here, the literal meaning is called Vachyartham in the traditional language, Sanskrit. It is given up, it is rejected, and the Lakshyartham, means the implied meaning, is taken up. What is implied meaning? The implied meaning is there is a river on the banks of Ganga. But in any literary book, you may find Gangayam Ghosha, means like that. This is called Jagad Ajagad Lakshana. The second method is Ajagad Lakshana. So here, the literal meaning is not totally rejected, but a meaning which is relatively more logical is taken up. The classical example in ancient books, Sveno Dhavati, means here the meaning is the red color runs. This is the literal meaning of it. But the true meaning is a horse which has got a red color is running. So here the idea is taken. An animal is running, but it is not red color that is running. Rather, it is a red-colored horse that's running. The third method is Jagad Ajagad Lakshana. And this is what is normally used for interpreting all the four Mahavakyas. Aham Brahmasmi, for example. Aham Brahmasmi here also you have to take the implied meaning of Aham and the implied meaning of Brahma. All that we have to take, as we are going to find out. So in all Mahavakyas, we have to use this particular method in analyzing and getting for getting a proper understanding of the Mahavakya, that is Lakshyartham, or the implication or the implied meaning. This is a very important point to remember in Vedantic hermeneutics. It's a very elaborate subject. There are altogether at least 78 different what you call vadas, different methods of analyzing statements, and okay, I'm going to those details. So here the point is Jagat Ajaga Lakshana. What it says is, let us say Tattwamasi. Here the literal meaning is Tat is Ishvara or God, Tvam is Jiva. So what we normally mean by implication is Tat, the Brahman or pervading supreme reality, which is beyond all limiting adjuncts, upadhis, beyond Maya, which cannot be called, defined in terms of being the creator of the universe, because creatorship also implies a limitation on the divine principle, which should be beyond and without any limitation. So the implied meaning is Brahman, which is supreme divine reality. And implied meaning of Tvam is not the individual being, but rather the divine principle, the divinity, the Atman, the divine spark that is present within this body-mind complex, which is not part of the Panchakoshas, either Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, or Anandamaya Kosha, which is the same reality, which is present all the time during the Jagrat Swapna Sushupti states, during the waking, dream, and deep sleep states. That divine principle within us is the same as the all-pervading divine principle. Maybe, of course, this is one way of interpreting. You know, according to Vedantins, they have different ways of explaining. It's called the Bimba Pratibimbavada. So, for example, the absolute reality is like the sun, and all the individual beings are different reflections of the sun. Anyway, we'll describe this earlier at a later occasion. So this is an important point to remember. Now, next subject to remember is there's a gradual evolution for every individual spiritual seeker. As I mentioned, from Tattwamasi, from instruction to experience. And it's possible for us to reach the ultimate goal only if we keep this truth, this fact in our mind. It can be considered to be the highest spiritual truth. It can be considered to be the highest philosophical conclusion. And it can also act as a simple common sense. The idea that the truth is one, and that truth is Brahman. It is present in all of us, but not in the sense of the physical body-mind complex, but the divine principle that activates this body-mind complex is the same as the supreme reality around. Now, this is an important thing to remember. The next subject, next Mahavakya is Aham Brahmasmi, is a very important Mahavakya. Here, Aham. So you can Aham Brahma Asmi. This comes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So those of you who have got a copy of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, you can see the 10th mantra of the fourth Brahmanam, fourth section of the first chapter of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. It's part of Shukla Yajurveda. Tattwamasi belongs to Samaveda because Chandogya Upanishad is, where Tattwamasi is discussed in the 6th chapter, belongs to Samaveda tradition. This Brihadaranyaka Upanishad belongs to Yajurveda tradition, and Yajurveda has got two traditions. One is Krishna Yajurveda, Shukla Yajurveda. This belongs to Shukla Yajurveda tradition. And this Aham Brahmasmi. And it seems that, in fact, in America, there are many musical groups who loudly chant these Mahavakyas with a lot of musical instruments. And that's what I heard. Somebody told me the other day. There are big musical groups who chant this Tattwamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, and all that. Big musical groups. Anyway, with the huge instruments, with of course wearing some very wonderful outlandish dress code and dresses, they chant this Mahavakya. That's something really wonderful. Anyway, so this comes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the 10th mantra of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, first chapter, 4th Brahmanam. Brahmanam is a section. The mantra is this: Brahmava idam agra asit tat atmanam aved aham brahmasmi iti tasmat tas sarvam abhavat. This is the Mahavakya. So that aham brahmasmi is a small, tiny fraction of this huge text, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The idea is this: Brahman was in the beginning. It is the origin of everything. I know it. I know this truth by or through this mystical experience. I am Brahman. And of course, there is a very elaborate commentary. Without the commentary, we will not be able to understand. I will describe this commentary later. But the idea is, when a spiritual seeker realized that he is Brahman, he also realized that same Brahman exists in all living beings. So that's why Tat Atmanam Aved. So it means he understood that Brahman to be himself, and he also realized that what exists as the divine principle in all beings is the same Brahman. So, Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahma. Everything is Brahman. This supreme realization, this spiritual seeker, the spiritual aspirant realized. This is the meaning of this particular text. Now, we should remember, from a philosophical angle, it's very interesting to keep this in mind. That is, when a spiritual seeker meditates, first when he prepares his mind for meditation, when he begins his spiritual journey by realizing that there are certain eternal, immortal, absolute things in this world, and there are certain things which are momentary, like flashing lights. And then he realizes that he should uphold what is eternal and he should discard what is non-eternal. The first disciplines, the Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka. This is the beginning of the spiritual journey. I mean, after this is what happens in our everyday life. Of course, what we consider to be valuable or eternal or important in our life, it changes in direct proportion to our evolution, our growth in wisdom and spirituality. As we evolve further and further, our definition or our conception of what really matters in life and what can be relatively disregarded, that also will change. And along with that, a strong spiritual tendency to uphold what is real and ignore or disregard what is unreal. That is Ihamutra Bhala Bhoga Viraga. The Sanskrit language puts in a way in the old, water type, the stereotype language. But in real life, it is very simple to understand. In our own life, when we are young and ambitious and working hard for getting a job, making a lot of money, then we have certain things in our life that we consider to be precious and important, what really matters. And as we evolve further, sometimes some people need some hard knocks on their head to open their eyes and to understand. Very often this happens, people do grow, but the wise people are those who don't wait for the blows to come to wake up. So even Buddha had to see those three visions, the sick man, the dead body, and also the old person, to understand that there are such things. Of course, he was an extreme case. But in our own life, the professional life, the family life, it is possible for us to become Vedantins. And America can be the land of Vedanta, considering the condition of the family situations. It is very easy to it is very easy for any sensible person to develop what we call detachment. Detachment is not something negative. Remember, that's an important, it's a very negative implication frequently make it. Vedanta is something, is a world negating, world denying philosophy. Not at all. Vedanta is pure common sense. So anything that makes us suddenly wake up to the reality that what we consider to be precious, well, after all, it is not so very precious. It's not so very important. And that gives us a chance to grow, take a quantum leap in spiritual wisdom. And then comes self-restraint. Ihamutra Bhala Bhoga Viraga, second, third one, self-restraint. Then when we become angry, we may have to respond to situations, but anger and all those things will not cloud our mind, mental horizon. So then what happens, we develop those skills, qualities as self-restraint, wisdom, and so on. And then happens mumukshutvam, a strong desire to look for something that is beyond. You can imagine. This happens to many people. So, of course, we don't know the history, we don't know the experience of many of these, some of these great people. Of course, in West American context, one example is this Paul Brandon, who suddenly felt like going to India and meet Ramana Maharshi. And that was actually, it was an entirely new chapter in his life. This man never looked back. He became a totally different person. So some experiences can can force us to open our eyes to the fact that all the money that we accumulated, all the wonderful people whom I call my friends, well, they won't be with us all the time. That happens. Mumukshutvam. And then we start looking for similar ideas. We may be visiting Vedanta, we may be visiting some holy places, we may go to a library and read books on some mystical teachings. And then that's the beginning of the journey, Sravanam. So Sravanam literally means reading, understanding Moksha Shastra scriptures with proper conviction of what they mean. This is Mananam. Sarvanam to Mananam. Mananam means deep thinking, contemplation, the meaning of what we read. And Nididhyasana, internalization. So Sanskrit terms. But in real life, we suddenly look for similar ideas. And then we think, we try to relate what we learn in the light of what we are experiencing. And then these spiritual qualities go deeper. It's called Nididhyasana. And then what happens? We we go in search of similar ideas. Now, when we actually reach this goal, and this is a very interesting point in Vedanta, this is a very, very interesting point. When we reach this goal, then there are two levels. One is we intellectually understand, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, Aham Brahmasmi, you understand. That is a Mahavakya. It's an experience. And when we reach that experience, when we actually reach that, we understand it and experience it as a fact, that's the ultimate stage. Before that, we may read these books, but still we have not experienced that state. Still reading these books are very important, because every time when we try to connect our mind to these ideas, it's an opportunity for these ideas to go deeper into the mental system, and that will slowly influence our thinking. And slowly you find, when we connect ourselves to these great ideas, slowly you find we feel a kind of serenity and inner peace. And that, in the light of Vedanta and of course Yoga Sutras, it is a sign that karmic blocks are getting loosened. We can see this frequently. So there are occasions when we want to do something, and we can certainly do that, we are able to do that. The circumstances are very, very conducive, very, very positive, very favorable, but mind doesn't permit us to do that. We can see this happening. Health is there, opportunities are there, and we sincerely want to practice spiritual disciplines, but mind somewhere blocks us. We feel that mind doesn't allow us to do what we sincerely want us to do. What we can very easily do if we try, and we are ready to try, but mind won't permit us to do. That is a sign which shows that our mind is full of negative samskaras. So Shankaracharya says, karmanishthayaha chitta suddhidvarena purushartha hedutvam. So if a person finds that the circumstances are very favorable, and he sincerely wants to meditate, and he sincerely wants to read scriptures, wants to lead a good life, make proper use of time and energy, everything, but still mind won't permit. The best thing for that person to do is to do something creative. And at a mental level, you may not find it easy to read a book when the mind is not cooperating. But at a physical level, we can do many things even when the mind is not fully willing to cooperate. For example, doing any act of charity, unselfishness, without a desire for the result of what we are doing as an offering to God, if you believe in God, or for the good of the world, if you don't believe in God. A Buddha's example is there. Then what happens, as we go on doing good things, the physical level, that slowly begins to help the mind to become more cooperative. And the mind slowly becomes less and less resistant and becomes more and more cooperative, helpful and friendly when we try to do good things. So a mind which will not permit us to do what we want to do, what we can very easily do, what we sincerely want to practice, that mind is an unfriendly mind. But the mind can be turned to be a friend and guide by practicing karma yoga. So the stage from Nityanistya Vastu Viveka, Ihamutra Bhalabhogi Viraga, Samadhi Shakar Sambhati, the three of the sadhana chatushtayas. Mean a strong sense of discerning wisdom between what is real, what is unreal, upholding the real, disregarding the unreal, and of course, then naturally all these other qualities, Saddha, Shama, Dhamma, Uparaditi, Diksha, Saddha, Samadhanam, all these are 6 qualities at the 3rd stage. These qualities will develop when we try to do something creative. And then a strong sense of desire, or a sense of desire, or strong desire for spiritual enlightenment will come, mukshutva. And then we will be able to spend our time and energy to spiritual practice. Sravanam, Mannam, Adidhyasanam. Now, Shankaracharya makes one important point in Vedanta. This is something very interesting. And these disciplines will take us to the highest philosophical or spiritual conviction, but not experience. And once we get the experience, that we find what we are searching is not something outside. What we are searching is something inside. In the Chadusutri Bhashya, Shankaracharya says, Annushtavya Atma Vijnana Prak Pramatuttam Atmanaha Annustasya Pramataiva Papa Doshadi Varjitaha Deharma Pratyo Yadit Pramanattvena Kalpidaha Laukikam Tattadevedam Pramanatva Atmanischayat. So, I am inquiring, I am going in search of spiritual realization. I want to know, and this is what I want to know. It's called, pramata, prameya, and pramana. Knowing and the knower and what the known, these distinctions. All this will disappear when we reach the experience level. So the experience level is the ultimate goal. And once we reach there, then all problems solved. Now, in Vedantic tradition, one point, remember, before we proceed in this Mahavakya tradition, Mahavakya Vichara is this very important. That is, one important discipline is there. That is, whether in Tattwamasi Mahavakya, or Aham Brahmasmi, Prajnanam Brahma, or Ayam Atma. In all these Mahavakya analytical discussions, you find Ishvara, Jiva, Brahman, all these ideas come. Now, Vedantins have tried to explain this in the light of some analogies. And one important analogy is the analogy of sun and its reflections. It's called Abhasavada. It's called Abhasa. It comes in the Brahma Sutra, Abhasa Eva. It comes in the second chapter or 50th Sutra, Abhasa Eva, where Shankaracharya mentions this. So, Brahman is the sun, and all jivas are like reflections of the sun in mirrors. Now you can imagine, suppose you have 1,000 ponds filled with water. You have one real sun and 1,000 reflections. If the water is removed from the pot, these reflections will vanish, but the real sun will continue. Another example, a much more important example in the context of Tattwamasi Mahavakya, is this. Our own face. When we look at a mirror, we can see the reflection of our own face in the mirror. The reflection on the mirror it corresponds to jivas, different individual souls. Our true face is Ishvara. Now, we call the reflections of the river, we use the word reflection only because because of the real face outside. The status of being a reflection in the mirror depends upon the fact that it is different from the real face, which is outside the mirror. It's called bimba pratibimba. The reflection is called pratibimba, and the face outside the mirror is called bimba. The status of bimbatvam or bimba, I mean the prototype we may call it, you give that name only in relation to its reflection. Suppose we think of the face without thinking of the mirror or reflections, then face alone exists. In this analogy, our real face is Brahman. And suppose we put a mirror in front of us, then in relation to the mirror, we would say that the face, the real prototype, and what is seen in the mirror is only a reflection. Now, Vedantins have got different, have various opinions regarding this. What is the relationship, if at all, between the face and its reflection? There cannot be reflection without the face and the mirror. So reflection has nothing to do with the real face, but it is not totally unlike, because there are many similarities. But still, reflection has nothing. If you hit that the reflection, you won't be hurt. So what it means is they are interrelated, at the same time they are different. But Brahman as such is totally disconnected with all this. So the moment you think of Tat, that is the absolute reality, which is Vachyartha, literally means Ishvara. The moment you remove from Ishvara the association or the reflecting, the limiting adjunct of Upadhi or Maya or creatorship, preservation, taking care of the entire thing, all these qualities associated with Ishvara. The moment you think of that Ishvara beyond, not without, but beyond, transcending all this, then that Ishvara is Brahman itself. That is Tat. Similarly, the Jiva, every individual Jiva has got all the properties, limitations and qualifications, qualities of happiness, enjoying and suffering, going through happiness and unhappiness, going through different circumstances and life situations, so on. These are part of the Antakaranas. Antakarana means Mana, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankara. Mind, which is the speculative faculty. Buddhi, the deciderative faculty, the deciding faculty, the determinative faculty. Chittam is the repository of all memories and tendencies. And Aham is the identification. This constitute one particular receptacle, like a mirror. So when Brahman is reflected on the mirror of these mind, intellect, tendencies, impressions, and then he appears to be Jiva. So every human being is nothing but a reflection of that absolute reality, Brahman. In that sense, we would say the world is one. So this is an important thing to remember. So very often the Vedantic concept of oneness and unity of existence may be totally misunderstood and misinterpreted, saying that God is everything. No, not in that sense. The moment we remove all the limiting adjuncts, all the outer shells, the moment we remove the mirror, then what remains is the face only. The moment we remove the water and the water pot in which sun is reflected, when they are removed, only sun remains. So what is the water here? What is the water pot? Our mind, our intellect, our tendencies and impressions. The divine principle is already there within us, but it manifests in so many different ways. In a jiva who has a lot of negative tendencies, negative samskaras, negative vrittis, the Brahman reflects in one manner. When jiva has none of this, when you become totally free, you actually become Brahmajnani and over a Brahman. At that time, this water pot is broken. This water is gone. The supreme reality alone remains. This is an interesting thing. Another way of analyzing the same thing is there. For example, jivas are the space within a pot. It's called the ghatakasha. Space limited by the shape and size of the pot. And the space outside the pot. After all, what is a pot? You keep a pot here and the space limited within that pot. Actually, it's not different from the space outside, but it's not the same because it has got a particular ghatakasha, the space within the pot. So apparently there's a difference, but the moment the pot is broken, the space within the pot becomes one with the space outside. Ghatakasha becomes Mahakasha, Avachedavada. So there are different schools in Vedantic tradition which analyze this relationship between Jiva, Ishvara, and Brahman, and so on. One is called this, what I already mentioned here, Bimba Pratibimbavada. Padmapada was an important exponent of this. The Vivarana school, they believe that all the jivas are different pratibimbas, different reflections of Brahman, reflections in the mirror. If the mirror is dirty, filled with dust, the reflection will be clear. If the mirror is clean, the reflection will be very wonderful. See, in a saintly person, the Brahman will manifest more clearly. In a person with a different character, it may not reflect so well. So every effort, every spiritual discipline is an attempt to clean up the mirror. Take a piece of paper, clean the surface of the mirror. Similarly, when we meditate, when we try to read books, when we practice spiritual disciplines, it is one way of cleaning up the mirror of our own antakarana. Antakarana, that's an important word in Vedanta. It has got 4 compartments: mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. Mind is the speculative faculty. When we see an object in front of us, whether it's that person or this person, about whether I should do this, I should do that, that faculty is called mind. When you decide, well, this is the person, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to speak, that you reach a kind of determinative faculty is called buddhi. But then all this depend upon chittam. And chittam is a repository of tendencies, impressions, samskaras, vasanas, sankalpas, coming from endless life cycles. So very often when we find that mind is not willing to cooperate, it's because some negative samskaras coming from some previous life cycles are creating blocks, obstacles in front of us. We want to meditate, we want to read good book, we want to do good things sincerely. Mind is not permitting because mind has got a lot of samskaras. Without our being aware of these samskaras can decide what we are going to do, what we are not going to do. It's an important thing to remember. Without our being aware of this. Sometimes we are aware. Those who practice spiritual disciplines, those who are advanced spiritual sadhakas, spiritual disciplines, those who are advanced spiritual aspirants, they will get some kind of an inner conviction. Well, I want to meditate, I want to do good things, but mind is not willing. Well, there's a problem. So I should I should try to do some good things so that mind will accumulate more of positive samskaras and mind become more friendly, more cooperative when we try to practice spiritual disciplines. So if the mirror is dirty and full of dust, take a piece of paper, wipe it off. To begin with, karma yoga. That's the only way for us to turn the balance of samskaras, the equilibrium of the samskaras within the mental system called the chittam. The most difficult thing for us to control is chittam. And then, of course, that leads to the next, the fourth one is aham, that identification. Aham, I am seeing this, I am doing that. It's called ego system. So these are four compartments of antakarana, of which chittam or the mental system is the most important because it is the most dominating, the most dominant part of this antakarana system. So when a person begins his spiritual journey from instruction Tattwamasi to Aham Brahmasmi, he goes through all these various cycles, various obstacles. I mentioned this at the beginning of the session. I mentioned there are two views among Vedantins with regard to this transition journey from Tattwamasi to Aham Brahmasmi. Those who are highly evolved persons, those who are fully established in sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, in this Sravana, Manana, Nidhyasana, etc. For them, the journey will be, the transition will be very, very smooth. You can very easily see. Suppose you want to meditate and immediately you feel a lot of enthusiasm to meditate, to do something. That means you are already familiar, you're fully equipped mentally with those samskaras. So those samskaras encourage you, well, go and meditate, wonderful, fine. On the other hand, if those samskaras are absent, if negative samskaras are dominant, then you try your best. The last moment, our own mind will create an excuse for non-meditating. Our own mind will create an excuse. We ourselves, oh, today I have, we invent. Mind deceiving itself is an important problem. It's more I have discussed the problem in Yoga Sutra lectures, but it is also very important in this particular context. But the journey from Tattwamasi to Aham Brahmasmi is very important. So there are two levels at the spiritual level, but in this 21st century, even the idea that we have to begin our journey towards something higher and transcendental, we should not stop our journey, our life at this empirical level. There is something much higher. There are higher possibilities for human being. At least this idea we will get when we study this Tattwamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, etc. So this may appear to be simple words, but they do have a tremendous spiritual implication and a tremendous value to our own everyday life, even in this 21st century. So thank you, Namaskar. Now we can have interaction. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Very good. C. Gopinath, please go ahead.
Yeah, please go. Not audible. Not
please
audible.
unmute. Please unmute yourself.
Please. Yeah.
You're still muted. While he's figuring it out, Sanjay, would you go ahead?
Can you help him, Gopinath? He's not audible.
I got it.
Oh, wait,
am I
there
okay
you
now?
are. Yes, now we
Okay.
can hear you.
No audible. Please continue.
Okay,
Please.
thank you. Sorry about that. Swamiji, when you described the movement from Tattwamasi to Aham Brahmasmi, going through the process of Shravana, Manana, and Nidhyasana, it looks like it's a path that an individual can go through. But when I look at the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where it discusses the Aham Brahmasmi passage, and this is Swami Ranganathananda's translation.
Yeah.
It says, this was indeed Brahman in the beginning. It knew only itself as I am Brahman. So this statement is made by Brahman itself. It's not like a mortal human being has gone through this process and has finally realized Brahman, but Brahman itself is declaring I am Brahman. So how can we take that as a kind of a motivation for us to move from Tattwamasi towards Aham Brahmasmi?
Yeah. So you can find a word here, Brahmava idam agra asit tad atmanam eva aved. That's the meaning here. That means that atmanam eva aved. It in the beginning there was only Brahman, and then he realized itself. Actually, this mantra begins as an answer to a question and discussion that took place earlier in the 9th mantra. So the 9th mantra says Aved is mentioned here. So the Aved. So in the 9th mantra, there is a discussion going on. So if Brahman realized Aham Brahmasmi by Aved, by knowing, then how can that status be immortal? Suppose a person, an individual, reaches Aham Brahmasmi experience as a result of some discipline, spiritual disciplines, then that experience cannot be eternal, because anything which is the effect of some activity cannot be eternal. So in Vedanta, one important principle is mokshasya akaritva. Moksha or liberation, the highest spiritual experience, is not the effect of the result of any activity. Because if an activity produces a result, then before that activity, it did not exist. And it can be neutralized also. So the important point is along with this realization, the spiritual seeker also realizes that even without or before his knowing, it is all Brahman. See, this is important. Even without and before his knowing Aham Brahmasmi, everything was Brahman. Brahmava idam agre. Agra is actually agre in the beginning. Agre becomes agra idvibhu in the sandhi or conjunction when it's followed by a vowel sound. Agra. So agre Brahma va actually means emphasis. Why va, all these are Vedic sound mean emphasis. Brahman, it's verily in English. I mean, in the highly boring old-fashioned English, they translate Brahma verily, V-E-R-I-L-Y. Now it's so at the very beginning, everything was Brahman, even before I realized, even without and before I realized, everything was Brahman. To emphasize the point of Bhashyakara, there's a lot of discussion going on. The fact that you are Brahman is not a result of your realizing that you are Brahman. Even if you don't realize it, you are Brahman. So there's Aved. The Aved is only a relative statement, because only when he practiced the spiritual disciplines, the outer shell of ignorance was removed, and then only he realized that he is Brahman. But actually, even before that, he was Brahman alone. Sarva bhavapatti, means sarvam khalu idam Brahma. This idea.
Okay. Thank you, Swami.
Then we discuss this. I'm going to discuss this mantra in detail. Then we will find out. So I shall explain. I shall give in a nutshell, I shall give the background of the 9th mantra. Because, I shall give a little more since you're interested. One of the most important mantras in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is Atma ityeva upasida. Atma ityeva upasida. So I am the Atman. This should be done as this should be practiced as this is spiritual discipline. So the point is, people wrongly think that Aham Brahmasmi experience is the result of certain spiritual disciplines, then this experience, so realize Brahman. But once you realize this Aham Brahmasmi experience, then you also realize, actually, I am Brahman, but the rest all are Brahman. Now, I realize that everything is Brahman, all others are Brahman, they are not involved in spiritual disciplines, still I realize they are all Brahman. So, Aham Brahmasmi Anubhuti requires spiritual disciplines, just as you need a light to understand that it is not a rope. So actually, light is not responsible for the fact that it's a rope.
It was always a rope.
Even if you don't bring light, it will be a rope. But light is necessary for you to bring a light in the dark, semi-dark room to understand that it is not snake but a rope. Similarly, all spiritual disciplines, including the Vedas, including Mahavakyas, are only ways to remove the obstacles that stand in the way of our realizing our true nature. And when we realize this, then we realize that we were Brahman even before we knew about it. That's an important thing.
Thank you.
So I shall give a brief description of the 9th mantra and then come to the 10th mantra. I mentioned this only as a beginning, this mantra I read, this small fraction of the beginning of the 10th mantra. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj. Sagata, are you in the queue?
Yeah, Pranam Maharaj, I have a question. So all these Mahavakas, they are talking about, looks like the same thing, but they are in 4 different Vedas. Now, at the when Ramayana happened, at that time, did all the 4 Vedas were available? Is it so? Or do you know?
Yeah. Ramayana, one of the greatest Vedic scholars of Ramayana, Hanuman. Ayurvedadharinaga na asama vedo vidusho shakyamevam prabhashidam krishnam vyagaranam nunam anena bhagudha sudam bhu vyakharada anena na kinchit apashabdidam. This statement, comes from Rama. You see, when Sri Rama in Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana, this is from Valmiki Ramayana. When Rama first met Hanuman, Hanuman was speaking chaste Sanskrit. Interesting, pure Sanskrit. And Hanuman did not directly speak to Rama because Hanuman was coming as an ambassador, diplomat of Sugriva, the monkey king. Story goes like that. So anyway, but here behind the mythology, there's a great value in this. So Hanuman spoke in Sanskrit with Lakshmana, and after that Hanuman was slowly retreating, walking back. The Rama turned to his brother Lakshmana and says, "Na anurveda vidhi vinitasya na ajurvedha na asama veda vidusho sakyamevam prabhashidam." No one can talk pure Sanskrit like this unless he has mastered Rigveda, Yajurveda, and Samaveda. Krishnam Vyakaranam Nunam Anena Bhagudha Sudam. This gentleman has learned the entire Sanskrit grammar, all branches of Sanskrit grammar. Then, Bhu Vyakarada Anena Na Kinchit Apashabdidam. He spoke for a very long time. There was not a single mispronunciation. I mean, we are following the RP, the received pronunciation, the the pure Oxbridge accent. Like that, Hanuman was speaking pure Sanskrit. There was not a single mispronunciation, and there's no violation of Queen's English, so to speak. Anyway, that means he was following all the rules of syntax and grammar and phonetics of Sanskrit. That is an estimate of Hanuman's linguistic skills and language proficiency from Rama himself. So you can imagine, remember, that means Vedas were already very popular even at the time of Ramayana.
Okay.
I wanted to give this story because even in Ramayana also, all the 4 Vedas are mentioned. In this verse, 3 Vedas are mentioned: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, and Samaveda.
Okay. Thank you, Pranam Maharaja. Thank you.
A little extended conversation will make this session slightly boring, a little more entertaining. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you,
Namaste,
Maharaj.
Maharaj.
Quite the
Namaste,
opposite,
Maharaj.
I think. Sanjay, you're next.
Namaste, Maharaj. Happy Guru Purnima. Today, according to Vedic calendar, Panchanga, today is Guru Purnima. So first of all, my pranams and thanks to your guidance. My question and request is, can you talk about the role of Guru for the audience here in our spiritual evolution?
Okay. Yeah, that's a simple matter. And so anyway, I shall explain this. In this Hindu tradition, there are these 2 concepts, Guru and Acharya, are 2 different concepts. Guru has got a spiritual implication. Acharya has can have a spiritual implication often, but it can also have a traditional implication. So the word Guru, Gu Shabdastu Andhakarasya, Ru Shabdastat Nirodhakaha, Andhakara Nirodhitva Guruhu iti abhidhiyate. So the definition of Guru Shabda itself is, Gu stands for darkness, and Ru stands for the light that removes the darkness. So Guru is the one who removes darkness. That's the traditional interpretation of definition of Guru Shabda. So in Vedantic tradition, in Hindu tradition, Guru, the place of Guru is very high, and people used to believe that if one may study well, use his intelligent intellect, but still knowledge or whatever vidya, whatever branch of learning you learn from a teacher will really become fruitful, blessing to you and blessing to others only by the grace of Guru. This is an important thing. The Guru tradition also you find in ancient Jewish tradition, Buddhist tradition, not only Hindu tradition, and in a way perhaps to some extent a different way in the Catholic Christian tradition as well. It's a very important thing. So it also shows the importance of respect and value of what we learn. A real teacher not only teaches, but also instills an element of wisdom in the student, so that the student will be able to make proper use of what he learns and avoid making improper use of what he learns. This moral and ethical dimension of Guru concept is very, very important. So this is the importance of Guru Purnima. Vyasa Purnima, I mean, in some tradition, we don't know when Vyasa was born, but a day observed as Vyasa Purnima is considered to be Guru Purnima. And because Vyasa was the one who actually edited the Vedas into 4 classifications. It's believed that Vedas were 1 in the early days, in the beginning. Vyasa classified, Vyasa Dhadu, it means editing, classifying. So he classified the Veda into 4, Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda. And also he wrote the Puranas, the huge 18 Mahabhuranas, all the Vyasa himself wrote. And also he has written Vyasa Smriti, and also he is the author of the most sublime devotional philosophical work in Hindu tradition called Bhagavata Purana. It's 18,000 verses, 12 skandhas, 12 sections, 335 chapters. So Vyasa is a very great name, very important name in Hindu tradition. And so Vyasa Purnima is celebrated as Guru Purnima. So thank you. Thank you. Another thing I want to tell you, this is very important. Now, if you find, if you analyze why certain traditions survived cataclysmic social and political upheavals, terrible wars and genocides, it's because they had this concept of reverence for a tradition and reverence for those who preserve the tradition. It's very important. I cannot think of a greater example than the Jewish tradition. And even Hinduism is about, in India underwent invasions for almost 1,000 years. Still Hinduism survives because of this tradition. It's also Jewish tradition. It's a greater, much more telling example of how reverence, respect for an ancient lineage and traditions helps a society to survive and to prosper. So the Guru ideal in different aspects you find in many traditions when outside Hinduism. I think the most wonderful example outside India you find in Jewish tradition, which were these rabbinical traditions. So also in Buddhism, of course, Jewish Guru tradition is very important in Buddhism as well. Okay, thank you for this question.
All right, David, you're next.
Hello, Swami. I have a related question. When in this scriptures, Hindu scriptures, when do we first see the concept of guru, the word guru or the concept of guru mentioned? When is it first mentioned in the Hindu scriptures, in the Vedas, if they're?
Yeah, the word guru is mentioned in Rig Veda, but the word acharya is mentioned much more extensively in Vedic literature. Guru is mentioned so many times in Bhagavata Purana. So is mentioned, but the word acharya, the acharya is on Achinodiki Shastrani, Acharya Sthapayatyavi, Swayam Acharadei Chapi, Tasmat Acharya. The definition of acharya. So acharya is a person who teaches scriptures, who preserves the scriptural tradition. Guru is a person who, Hindu tradition, Guru is a person who performs Upanayana, Gayatri Mantra. Acharya is a person who teaches the Vedas. But in the Mahabharata, of course, it is so many times, so many references to Mahabharata. There's a Guru Gita also in some scriptures you find. So the word guru is mentioned in the Vedic tradition, and also in the word acharya is mentioned in the Yajurveda, and the Mahabharata is full of references to ideal guru. Yeah.
Does the guru that is mentioned in the Rig Veda, does it have the same concept that we see like in Tantra or nowadays like in the Ramakrishna order? I mean, is in the Rig Veda, does guru mean the same thing?
No, this is thousands of years old. So the Vedic language is not so direct. Vedic language is not direct. For example, in the Vedic society, there was a particular group of people who were considered to be the gurus, the teachers of the society, who were married, who remain unmarried, and who dedicate their whole life to the preservation of these scriptures. So that's as old as Vedic times. Snataka vritti, the vritti, I mean the way of life of a teacher. Yeah. Without Guru tradition, many of the ancient values would not have been preserved, actually. That's an important thing. See, when you practice a tradition, when you teach a value, if you don't have somebody, some human being, ideal human being, who practiced, preserved it, if you don't find out somebody, then it may disappear. I can give an example. Mindfulness has become a rage now, highly commercial commodity. But mindfulness is actually based upon Buddha's discourse, Mahasatipatthana Sutta and Satipatthana Sutta. The smaller one, the shorter one is Satipatthana Sutta, which he preached to bhikkhus or monks, Buddhist monks, and Mahasatipatthana Sutta is an more extensive one, which he preached to the laity. So, but today people teach mindfulness even in medical institutions. They will never mention Buddha's name. If you suppose you teach Sermon on the Mount without pointing out a man like Christ, who in many ways embodied what Sermon on the Mount continues, and then it becomes, you be humble, you be, well, all right, wonderful, fine. But when you have somebody like Buddha or Christ to point out, then it actually becomes more forceful, more effective. So this Guru ideal actually has saved societies, ancient cultures in difficult times, because there is the sense of sanctity and sacredness to scriptures, and to those who preserve those scriptures through their own personal sacrifices and ascetic disciplines. Without that, many of the ancient values would become extinct. You can imagine the old Mayan, Incan, Egyptian cultures. Nobody knows how they built the pyramids. But if you go to the Bay Area, they still build temples, built into temples. The structure, many of the structures, many of the methods they employ are still being used in India, and they were used in 3000 BC. If we go to Angkor Wat in Cambodia, many of the temple structures resemble some of the structures they built 20 years ago in the Bay Area. You see, imagine the dance forms, the music. So you respect those persons who preserve the ancient things, and you respect those ancient values as well. Without that, they will not survive. So Guru tradition is not just a spiritual tradition, it has got a lot of implication in social, cultural levels. I think that's what we are facing today in modern 21st century. When you are taught to not care for anyone, what you get is anarchy and many things else. Okay, thank you. It's a different subject, of course.
Thank you, Maharaj. Mark Goodrich has a question.
Pranam, Swamiji. During your discourse, you were talking about the desire to perform spiritual practice, but the fact that the mind is obstructing us. You want to do it, but the mind won't let you do it. And you said that the best thing to do in that case is do something creative. Now, do you mean by doing something creative, do you mean like writing a poem or writing a song, or what exactly do you mean by doing something creative?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Need some clarification, I understand. So what it means, you do something which is closer to what you really want to do, what your mind is not willing to permit you to do. Suppose you want to go to a temple and meditate, church, meditate. Well, I mean, if you cannot meditate the temple, you be part of some activity going on in the temple. The temple, sitting in our room, writing something may not mentally bring us close to that. So somehow we should be doing things which somehow bring us closer to our ideal, to what we sincerely want to do. That's important. And that close association will weaken the obstacles. For example, if I would say, if one cannot meditate, better read some good scripture, spiritual books, not some sense thriller or something spiritual. Because reading some scriptures, spiritual books will help you to weaken the resistance that comes from the mind, the obstacles. We should be doing something closer to the ideal, to what we sincerely want to do. Somehow related to what we want to do.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maharaj, there were no further questions. There were many compliments, appropriately enough, for your instruction. Great gratitude is expressed by one and all.
Okay, thank you. This is an important announcement for you. Thank you for reminding. Then we are going to celebrate Guru Purnima on July 8th, Saturday, at 10 a.m. In our new temple, that is 2323 Velago Street, San Francisco. So please remember our Guru Purnima celebration on Saturday, July 8th. Will begin at 10 a.m. with puja, and then there will be talks on the Guru ideal. Guru Purnima, there will be talks on Guru Purnima, and there will be flower offerings, devotional music, reading from scriptures, and also prasad lunch. Please remember, 2323 Velago Street, San Francisco, New Temple. We will have Guru Purnima. And another important announcement: we will have a Labor Day retreat on Saturday, September 2nd to September 4th. That is September 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Labor Day retreat. The new temple, Vivekananda Hall. The time is 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. The topic will be the Holy Mother Sri Sharada Devi, a spiritual ideal to the modern age. Okay, thank you. So you can get more information from our online bulletin and also from our website. Okay, thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.
Pranam Maharaj. Thank you.